Nutz About Cars Storytellers Series Cars That Refuse to Die. Chapter 1 The Car That Waited. I didn't know it at the time, but that day started years earlier. It started in the quiet little sacrifices you don't brag about because they don't sound heroic. The kind you make without a drum roll. A paycheck that went to braces instead of a project car. A Saturday that went to a graduation party instead of a swap meet. A tool you didn't buy because the water heater made a noise that sounded expensive. That's what a family does to a man who loves cars. It doesn't kill the love. It just teaches it to sit patiently in the corner like an old dog. Loyal. Waiting. Not whining. Back then, I told myself it was temporary. Someday, I'd say. Like someday is a real date on a calendar. Then someday showed up wearing silence. The kids were grown. The house got bigger without changing size. The hallways felt longer. You'd walk past rooms that used to be loud and feel the air is different, like it's holding its breath. That's when you realize parenting doesn't end. It just stops needing you every second. And there's a strange emptiness when you're not needed the same way. Some men fill that space with golf, some with overtime, some with a chair, a remote, and the slow drift into becoming a ghost in their own living room. Me? I started looking at the garage like it was a promise I'd made and forgotten to keep. Not a big dramatic decision, more like a gentle itch you can't scratch. I'd catch myself watching car videos at night with the volume low, like I was hiding candy. I'd pause on old steel, old chrome, old dashboards with needles that still looked ready to tell the truth. It wasn't about going fast. It was about going back, about finding the version of myself that existed before life got heavy. And my wife, she saw it before I said a word. That's one of the underrated miracles of a good marriage. The person who loves you learns the difference between who you are and what life made you do for a while. She didn't push, she didn't tease, she didn't roll her eyes at another car thing. She just started making room in the world for me to be myself again. It was small stuff. A casual, you should take a Saturday for you. Why don't you look for something affordable, something you can tinker with? The kind of permission a man doesn't realize he's been waiting for. And she always added the same phrase, quiet but firm. On a budget. Because she knew something else too. The budget wasn't the enemy. The budget was the anchor. It kept dreams from turning into regrets. We weren't playing rich. We were playing real. So when the story of the car came to me, it didn't come like a billboard. It came like a whisper. It was a sentence from a guy I only half knew. The kind of guy you run into at a gas station or a hardware store. You don't know his last name, but you recognize his hands. A little stained, a little scarred, nails that have seen work. He said it the way you mention a rumor you're not sure is safe. There's an old car out there, he told me. Been sitting forever. Nobody talks about it. No make, no model, no year, just out there. Now, I'm older, and I've learned something. When people refuse to talk about something, it's rarely because it's boring. It's because it's loaded. It's because it's got a story wrapped around it like wire. I did what a sensible man does. I tried to ignore it. But that sentence followed me home. It followed me into the garage, where the light always felt a little too bright. It followed me into the kitchen, where my wife was doing dishes like she'd done 1,000 times, calm and steady, like the world was still worth maintaining. I mentioned it casually, like it didn't matter. You ever hear about an old car sitting out somewhere? People won't talk about it? She didn't even turn around at first. Just said, "How much?" I laughed. I don't even know what it is. That's not what I asked. That's the thing about loving wives who've watched you put everyone else first for years. They don't get distracted by the smoke. They see the fire. It's probably nothing, I said. She rinsed her hands, dried them, and turned toward me with that look. Not permission, not denial, just the truth. If it's nothing, you'll come back with a story. If it's something, you'll come back with a spark in your eyes I haven't seen in a while. Then she added, like a seatbelt clicking into place, on a budget. I promised her I'd just take a drive. No commitments, no fantasies, no hauling anything home. Just a look. The directions were a mess, the way real directions always are. Turn where the pavement gives up. Pass a mailbox with no numbers. Go until the trees start leaning in like they're listening. That day, the sky was the color of old steel. Not stormy, not clear, just watchful. As I drove, I found myself thinking about how different that drive would have been 10 years earlier. 10 years earlier, I would have had a list. 10 years earlier, I would have been late for something. 10 years earlier, the idea of chasing a rumor would have felt irresponsible. Now, it felt like a small rebellion. The road narrowed. The shoulders disappeared. The world grew quiet in a way only rural roads get quiet, like the noise of civilization got tired and gave up. And that's when the first weird feeling hit me. Not fear, exactly. More like crossing a line. There are places where you can tell the land remembers things. Places where you feel like you're not just driving through space, you're driving through old decisions. I pulled off near a stand of trees and killed the engine. Just sat there for a second, listening to the tick of cooling metal. In my head, I heard my own voice, older and wiser, the voice I have now. If you had turned around right there, your life would still be your life, just smaller. I got out, walked toward the property line. The barn sat back from the road like it was hiding, not collapsed, not rotting completely, still upright, still latched, still keeping a secret. That was the first thing that didn't match abandoned. Abandoned places don't stay polite. They fall apart loudly. They invite nature in and dare you to deal with it. This barn still had rules. The doors were shut and held shut by a chain that wasn't rusted through. Somebody had cared enough to close it properly, and then never came back. My hand touched the chain. Cold, heavy. The kind of cold that makes you think of basements, old tools, and forgotten winters. The lock wasn't fancy, but it was there, which meant I wasn't supposed to be there. That's when my conscience started talking. The budget voice, the responsible voice, the you're a grown man, act like it voice. And then I heard another voice, the younger me, the one who used to press his face to the fence at the AMC plant, watching cars roll out like they were being born. That voice said, "Just look." So I did the thing I'm not proud of, but I'm honest about. I didn't break anything. I didn't force anything. The chain had slack, the latch was old, and the doors had been opened before. I eased them apart like I was entering a church. When the doors cracked open, the air didn't rush out. It just breathed. Dust floated in the shaft of light like it had been waiting for company, not swirling like chaos, but drifting like a slow snowfall that forgot to fall. The smell hit next. Old wood, old oil, old vinyl. Time. And then I saw it. Not gleaming, not restored, not staged for Instagram, covered, protected. A tarp laid over it like a blanket. And the way that tarp sat told me everything. No boxes stacked on top. No rakes leaning against it. No junk piled around it like people do when they stop caring. This car had been given space, respectful space. I walked closer, step by step, and the older voice in my head whispered again. This isn't a barn find. This is a pause button. My fingers found the edge of the tarp and hesitated. It felt wrong, like pulling the sheet off something that wasn't mine to see. But curiosity is a strange kind of hunger. Once it wakes up, It doesn't care about manners. I pulled. The tarp slid back with a sound like fabric over skin, and the car appeared slowly, the way truth does. I'm not going to tell you the exact make and model yet, not because I'm trying to be dramatic, but because back then I didn't know what I was looking at. I only knew what I felt. It was old. Classic lines. The kind of curves that came from a pencil, not a computer. Paint that had dulled but hadn't died. Chrome that still tried, even under dust. It looked like a car that had once been somebody's pride. And then something else. It looked like a car that had been loved by someone who wasn't done loving it. I leaned in. The window was slightly cracked. Inside, the seats were worn in the places a body returns to. The steering wheel had that smooth shine where hands rest, where years polish the material without asking permission. A man's hands, a lot of miles. I opened the door and the hinge creaked softly, like it was clearing its throat after a long silence. The interior smell came up stronger. Old vinyl, a hint of gasoline that had long since evaporated into memory, and something else. Paper. I looked down. There were receipts, not stacks, not chaos. Just a few, folded and tucked. Oil changes, parts, a battery from a place that didn't exist anymore. Maintenance, the kind a person does when they plan to keep something alive. My heart did that thing it does when it recognizes something personal and something it doesn't understand yet. I checked the odometer. The number sat there like a confession. This car had lived. And then I looked at the ignition. The keys were still in it. Not hanging nearby. Not hidden. Not missing. Still in place. That's when the air changed, because there are only a few reasons you leave keys in a car. 1, you don't care. 2, you want someone else to take it. 3, you thought you'd be back so soon it wasn't worth taking them out. This didn't feel like 1 or 2. This felt like interrupted. My skin prickled. Not fear, exactly. Awareness. I reached for the glove box. It was stiff at first, like it didn't like being asked to open. Then it gave, and the little door dropped down with a soft thud. Inside, there were a few things you'd expect. Old registration papers, a napkin that had turned brittle, a pen that probably hadn't worked in years. And then there was something you wouldn't expect in a car that had been sitting forever. A parking permit. Faded, yes. Brittle, yes. But readable. It wasn't local. Not even close. The kind of permit you'd get for a place with gates and guard booths. The kind of permit that implies routine, a commute, a life, and it had a date printed on it. I stared at that date longer than I want to admit, because the date didn't match the dust. It didn't match the way the barn had swallowed time. It didn't match the story I'd been told. That date said this car had been somewhere else, recently enough to still have its paperwork intact. I sat back on my heels and felt the first real pulse of the mystery. Not, what kind of car is it? Mystery. Bigger. Why did it stop here? I looked around the barn as if the answer might be written in the wood grain. I checked the floor. No puddles. No signs of an accident. No scattered tools or half-finished work. No evidence of a restoration started and abandoned. This was not a project. This was a hiding place. Outside, the land was quiet. No house close enough to claim the barn as daily space. No fresh tire tracks. No new footprints. Nothing to suggest someone had been here yesterday. It was the perfect place to put something you didn't want found. Which raised a question I didn't like. If someone didn't want it found, why did I find it? That's when I heard a sound I'll never forget. A soft metallic tap. Not from inside the barn, from outside. Like something touched the barn door, or brushed the metal siding. Or maybe it was just the wind finding a loose hinge. But the timing was too sharp. I froze. The kind of freeze you don't practice. Instinct, pure and animal. Then another sound. a faint crunch, gravel, a step. My mind raced through explanations. Raccoon, deer, wind, branch. But the sounds didn't have the randomness of nature. They had intention. I didn't call out, didn't move, just listened. Then silence again. The barn held its breath. I held mine with it. I eased toward the gap in the doors and looked out. Nothing. No one. Just trees, and the long stretch of road, and the quiet. But now I couldn't shake the feeling that the land had noticed me. I backed away from the door and looked at the car again. Keys in the ignition. Permit with the wrong date. Receipts that suggested care. A barn that was closed properly, not abandoned. And a sound outside that felt like a warning without words. The older voice in my head spoke again, calm and certain. This is the moment you should have turned around. But I didn't, because I wasn't just looking at a car anymore. I was looking at a story that had been parked on purpose. I slid the glove box shut and stood slowly, as if standing too fast would startle the past. I pulled the tarp back over the car, carefully, respectfully, like tucking something back into sleep. Then I stepped out of the barn and closed the doors again, leaving them almost exactly as I found them. Almost. Because now I knew, and knowledge changes things, even if you try to put them back. On the drive home, my hand stayed tight on the wheel, not from fear, from focus. I kept thinking about my wife, about the way she'd looked at me when she said, "On a budget." This was already beyond budget. Not money budget. Life budget. The kind of budget that counts sleep and peace and the simple assumption that the past stays put. When I got home, she knew something was different before I spoke. "How was it?" she asked. I set my keys on the counter like they weighed more than they should. "It's real," I said. Her eyes lit just for a second, and then she read my face more closely. "What's wrong?" I exhaled. "The car's been sitting a long time," I said, "but not as long as people think." She didn't interrupt. She waited. That steadiness again, the kind that keeps you from becoming reckless. The keys were still in it, I added. That made her blink. "And there was a permit," I said, "with a date that doesn't make sense." She leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "And you want to go back," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. She stared at me for a moment, and I watched her do what good partners do. Weigh love against risk, joy against consequence. Finally, she said, "If you go back, you don't go back alone." I started. If part one of this story stayed with you, if it stirred something you recognize, I'd invite you to stay a little longer. Like the story, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss part two. Some stories don't end where you think they will, and this one is just getting started.